In this brief demo, I'm going to show you how to apply a variety of acrylic mediums and gessos and use a variety of tools to get a textured surface on your canvas. The materials that I will be using are a thickened gesso, which is in the big bucket, some painter's brushes and palettes, some ribbon with holes punched out of it, some palette knives, some combs, some painter's tape, and some tissue paper. The object is to create a sculpture on this canvas that will be basically something that could stand on its own as an abstract sculpture and make a nice, interesting surface. I've added some blue painter's tape to the canvas. See, it's a little bit crooked there. This will protect the canvas from the texture and give me a little more interest where this area will have no material applied at all. I'll start with a brush and my thick gesso, and I'll just begin essentially smoothing the gesso around on the canvas. This is a canvas board, so I can work with it fairly easily because it's quite stiff. Of course, this process could also be applied to a stretched canvas. The area that I've just covered is the area where I want to place some tissue paper. So I'm going to tear up some paper, wrinkle it up. I need to make sure that the surface underneath the tissue paper is totally covered with gesso so that it will completely embed the tissue paper into the surface. Once the paper is on the surface, I want to make sure I get it below my blue tape there. Once the paper is on the surface, I can spread it around with my hands. I can see here it's going to go a wee bit further than what I pre-gessoed. So I can spread it around with my hands to get it adhering to the canvas. Then I'm going to cover the top completely with more gesso. And this is important because the paper is very porous. And you don't want to start painting on top of a paper that's going to absorb more paint than the rest of the image, unless that's the kind of effect you want to go for. When you're coating the gesso over the top of the paper, you do have to be a bit careful because you could tear the paper. This gesso I'm using is very, very thick. I want to smooth it out a little bit, but I still want to see the effects of that tissue paper. So I'm using my palette knife to do some smoothing. So I'm going to have some wrinkles, I'm going to have some flat areas, and I think that's going to make a really interesting surface. This painting will be a representational abstract painting. I will do some floral elements and some abstract elements in the background. So now I'm going to finish with the rest of the gesso on the canvas. And again, I'm not really putting any of these textured elements exactly where my objects or my representational elements will be placed. I'm really creating a texture that will stand as a sculpture completely on its own. Get the rest of this board finished, and then I'll do a little more texturizing with a variety of the tools that I've got available to me here. So this top section, which is above the line, that's going to be pretty smooth. I think up here I'm going to put a little extra material. I'm going to do some palette knife work here. So I want this to look like it was all applied with a palette knife, so it sort of looks like an old stucco wall. I'll still have a few brush strokes that I'll leave in between, but that gives me a nice surface. I'm going to use a plastic comb, and I want to put a few lines in here. That's kind of interesting. It just draws through the surface, so that'll give me something. Down here at the bottom, I'm going to use my ribbon, which has holes in it. Just kind of stick it on there. And again, use my palette knife to sort of smooth over this ribbon and push some of the gesso through the holes. I'm going to leave it sit in there for just a couple of minutes, and when I pull it out, I'll have the impression of the holes that are in the middle of the ribbon. I'm going to pull it off slowly. If I pull it too fast, I might get some bubbles. So you can see there's not a huge amount of texture in there, but there is just a little bit that'll be pleasant and give it some interest in that area. I've got some specialty palette knives here that actually also do some lines and grids, so I'm going to do a little bit of that over here, and I can use both the flat surface and the surface with the edges. And again, what I'm going for is something that's really kind of contrary to what I plan on painting. I've got a variety of palette knives that'll do some different things, and if I press and pull, it'll give me a few wrinkles. And I also can use a printer brayer or a roller. I'm going to just get a little bit of this texture right here on the surface, and that'll just give me a few little teeny weeny wrinkles. 2 more wrinkles down here. And there, oh, I like that. That looks really good. All right. So I'm sort of looking at this whole canvas together as an abstract composition. I want to see that there's some movement going on. I've pulled my back out. So I'm looking at the whole composition at this point in terms of the way it works. I really like some of the movement. I like the texture. This is a little too much, so I'm going to flatten that out. So anytime you apply some texture that you don't like, you have the option of just going back and flattening it out, brushing over it. It's time to do my reveal. Let's pull off my painter's tape, and I've got this nice, smooth piece of canvas just right there, partway up my canvas, and that's going to look really interesting when I do my painting. So this is a small piece. Not a lot of paper's embedded in it. This should take just really overnight to dry. You can certainly add a lot more. The more you put on your canvas, the longer it will take for your canvas to dry, so that's something to keep in mind. So that's the end of this segment. It's just a brief video of how to apply gesso and some papers and use a few tools to get some texture on your canvas prior to painting.